Study Session 9, Feminist Theory. Introduction. In the previous study session, we discussed the critical theory and its assumptions. In this study session, we will examine the concept of feminist theory and its importance to international relations. We will also discuss the strands of feminist theory and assumptions of the theory. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this study session, you should be able to highlight the importance of feminist theory to international relations, analyze at least 4 strands of feminism, itemize at least 4 assumptions of feminist theory. Concepts of feminist theory. Feminist theory or feminism is a theory which views international relations primarily from a gender perspective. Let us first have an understanding of the concept of gender. The word gender is not a synonym for the term sex, which refers to the biological difference between men and women. Rather, it refers to the complex social construction of men's and women's identities and behaviors in relation to each other. Gender describes the relationship between the sexes in any given society. Before we go on, there are some basic things you need to understand about feminism. These are: 1. Feminism is a study of gender rather than women and the differences that gender makes to world politics. It is not simply about women. It is about the interdependence of masculine and feminine as socially constructed categories that shape how we know and experience the world. 3. Feminists believe that gender roles are socially constructed and thus question whether it is appropriate to assume we know what women are and what their feminine characteristics are. 4. It is not only women that are feminists. Men could as well be. Feminists are all those who are concerned about the issue of gender, whether male or female. Gender refers to the complex social construction of men's and women's identities and behaviors in relation to each other. It describes the relationship between the sexes in any given society. Contemporary feminism has its roots in a social movement, the women's liberation movement. It represents a protest against prevailing gender-based power structures and against accepted societal norms and values concerning women and men. It represents a protest against prevailing gender-based power structures and against accepted societal norms and values concerning women and men. Feminists have expressed this protest in a variety of ways, with some demanding that women should be allowed to join the spheres in which only men historically have been permitted, and others demanding more dramatic and fundamental social change. Feminist theory of international relations involves looking at how international politics affects and is affected by both men and women, and also at how the core concepts that are employed within the discipline of international relations, e.g., war, security, power, etc., are themselves thoroughly genderized. Feminists analyze relations of power involving men and women, how that power is exerted, and how that interaction has been habitually, historically, and socially implemented over time, though not as a result of inherent or biological differences of either sex. It is quite obvious that women in almost all parts of the world have been and still remain second-class citizens economically, politically, and socially. Thus, Feminists argue that women's position in society is unequal to that of men, and that society is structured in such a way as to benefit men to the political, social, and economic detriment of women. Feminists analyze relations of power involving men and women, how that power is exerted, and how that interaction has been habitually, historically, and socially implemented over time. It should be noted that although many feminists tend to concentrate on the position of women, the main focus of contemporary feminism is in gender identities and gender relations. It should be noted that feminist international relations has not only concerned itself with the traditional focus of international relations on states, wars, diplomacy, and security. Feminism have also emphasized the importance of looking at how gender shapes the current global political economy. Feminist theories argue that the international system has a strongly masculinity orientation, with men as the most active agents and occupying most of the prominent positions. Women, on the other hand, have been regarded as occupying largely passive roles in a domestic sphere and have therefore been almost invisible. Importance of feminists to international relations. Feminist theory of international relations emerged largely from the late 1980s onwards. Before then, women and gender issues were ignored or marginalized in the study of international relations. The end of the Cold War and the re-evaluation of traditional international relations theory during the 1990s opened up a space for gendering international relations. Overall, feminist theory says that most of the key players in international relations, such as policymakers, heads of government, and academic professionals, have been and still are males who come from socially patriarchal and political backgrounds. Feminists believe that international relations are competitive, power-oriented, and exploitative, mainly because of male domination in politics. They argue that international relations would be more balanced and effective if women were given their due share in politics through several ways. Thus, one of the goals of feminists is to increase the participation of women in the political process and the position they hold at all levels. They are particularly concerned about how to improve the lot of women in the international system. Feminist theory, therefore, believes that the interrelationship between the global order and gender relations needs to be made more visible in the study of international relations. They argue that there is a need for us to know how humanity as a whole is shaped by and helps to shape the dynamics of the global system. It should be noted that although many feminists tend to concentrate on the position of women, the main focus of contemporary feminism is in gender identities and gender relations. It should be noted that feminist international relations has not only concerned itself with the traditional focus on international relations on states, wars, diplomacy, and security. Feminism have also emphasized the importance of looking at how gender shapes the current global political economy. Strands of feminist theory. In the last study session, we discussed the theory of feminism and how it has contributed to the international relations as a discourse. I also pointed out to you that the feminist theory is basically concerned about the issue of gender analysis. For a better understanding of the theory, I believe it is necessary for us to look at the variants or strands of feminism Like almost all the theories of international relations, there are diverse strands of feminist theory. Each of these strands has in common the agenda of gender equality, but do have differences in their assumptions. Let us examine some of these strands. For the purposes of this lecture, we shall examine 4 strands of feminist theory. These are radical, liberal, Marxist, and critical feminism. Let us examine each of them. Radical feminist theory. Radical feminism argues that women's oppression is the first and most widespread and deepest oppression. It views women's oppression as a fundamental element in human society and seeks to challenge that standard by broadly rejecting standard gender roles. The traditional radical feminist standpoint may be expressed as viewing the division in all societies as that between men and women, and stating that men are the oppressors of women. Radical feminists developed the concept of patriarchy to explain the institutionalization of male domination over women, and thereby demonstrating that gender was not a question of individual identity or sexuality. Violence and oppression of women, because they are women, is more fundamental than other forms of oppression relating to class, ethnicity, religion, etc. Radical feminism, therefore, aims to challenge and to overthrow patriarchy by opposing standard gender roles and what radical feminists see as male oppression of women, and calls for a radical reordering of society. Violence and oppression of women, because they are women, is more fundamental than other forms of oppression related to class, ethnicity, religion, etc. Radical feminism, therefore, aims to challenge and to overthrow patriarchy by opposing standard gender roles and what radical feminists see as male oppression of women. Liberal feminist theory. Liberal feminism argues that participation in public life is the key to advancing the status of women in the international system. Liberal feminists seek no special privileges for women, but simply demand that everyone should receive equal consideration without discrimination on the basis of sex. They seek to remove barriers that prevent equal access for women, not only to provide economic equality, but also to provide access to higher paying jobs for women. According to liberal feminists, all women are capable of asserting their ability to achieve equality. Therefore, it is possible for change to happen without altering the structure of society. They argue that women, like men, are rational beings and are equally intelligent, and so they have the right to participate in public life and make political, social, and economic contributions to society, and not that they should be confined to the private sphere of the home and the family. They believe that education, political mobilization, and pressure to change will bring about the desired results. They believe that perceived gender differences are basically the effects of discrimination. Liberal feminists, therefore, seek to secure for women the rights and privileges already enjoyed by men. In essence, liberal feminists are concerned about the improvement of the status of women around the world, an increase in women's participation in public life, and gaining access to power. They believe that through the eradication of institutional bias and the implementation of better laws, the state can help to improve the status of women. Marxist feminist theory. Marxist feminism is a strand of feminist theory which focuses on the dismantling of capitalism as a way to liberate women. Marxist feminism states that private property, which gives rise to economic inequality, dependence, political confusion, and ultimately unhealthy social relations between men and women, is the root of women's oppression in the current social context. Marxist feminists see contemporary gender inequality as determined ultimately by the capitalist mode of production. Gender oppression is class oppression, and the relationship between man and woman in society is similar to the relations between proletariat and the bourgeois. Women's subordination is seen as a form of class oppression, which is maintained because it serves the interest of capital and the ruling class. Gender oppression is class oppression, and the relationship between man and woman in society is similar to the relations between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. Women's subordination is seen as a form of class oppression, which is maintained because it serves the interests of capital and the ruling class. Marxist feminism claimed that the emergence of capitalism as a social and economic system brought about a clear distinction between the public realm of work and the private realm of the home and the family. This distinction serves to reduce women and children to the private property of men. It also rendered inconsequential the vital role that women's unpaid labor in the home makes to the capitalist economy. This distinction serves to reduce women and children to the private property of men. It also rendered inconsequential the vital role that women's unpaid labor in the home makes to the capitalist economy. Critical feminist theory. Critical feminists draw upon some insights of Marxism. However, they stress the importance of ideas about gender in legitimizing social inequality. They argue that gender is constructed on a socially relevant difference that is then used to justify differential treatment between men and women. Thus, gender is institutionalized in social practice. They are therefore concerned with freeing women from oppressive relationships and in expanding the realm of autonomy that women enjoy over their own lives. Also of importance is the view of the critical feminists on the issue of the state. Critical feminists see the state as patriarchal to the extent that it supports institutions like marriage, which reflects and sustains a male-dominated social order. Therefore, this makes women to be overly dependent on men. The construction of women as dependents, who are identified only in terms of their relationship to men as wives and mothers, play a role in limiting their citizenship. Critical feminists thus view the state as a set of power relations and political process in which patriarchy is both constructed and contested. Basic assumptions of feminist theory. We can summarize the views of the feminists as follows. 1. Feminists utilize gender as a central category of analysis. 2. They regard gender as a particular kind of power relationship. 3. They draw attention to the division of the sexes at public and private spheres as central to our understanding of international relations. 4. Feminists trace the ways in which ideas about gender are central to the functioning of major international institutions and how gender relations might be perpetuated or changed through policies, laws from international institutions. 5. They suggested that gender is embedded in the international order. 6. They challenge dominant assumptions about what is significant or insignificant, marginal or central, in the study of international relations. 7. Feminists utilize gender lenses to view international relations. Make case for the importance of this feminism theory in contemporary politics. Post your contributions on Study Session 9 forum page on course websites. Study session summary. In this study session, you learn that feminists utilize gender as a central category of analysis. The word gender is not a synonym for the term sex, which refers to the biological difference between men and women. Rather, it refers to the complex social construction of men's and women's identities and behavior in relation to each other. It sees gender as a particular kind of power relationship. The strands of feminism are: radical feminism challenges patriarchy and calls for a radical reordering of society. Liberal feminists are concerned about the improvement of the status of women around the world and increase in women's participation in public life and gaining access to power. While Marxist feminists see contemporary gender inequality as determined ultimately by the capitalist mode of production. Lastly, critical feminists argue that gender is constructed on a socially relevant difference that is then used to justify differential treatment between men and women. Finally, feminists have concentrated more on women because they believe that women have been subjected to discrimination and unequal treatment all over the world.